The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Glad you could come to our webinar on the ISO 9001 2015 transition. Hopefully the information that we're presenting here this morning will help give you a better understanding of the requirements that are in this 2015 standard and path to and your journey towards getting certification to this upgraded standard. My name is John Vandenbenden, as many of you know, and I will be the host and the instructor here for this little webinar. If you have a question or so, feel free to use the chat, and we will try to address any questions that you have in a timely manner. So, welcome again, and let's go through the presentation. As many of you know, one of the oldest management standards is ISO 9001. It began its history in 1987, had a very minor revision, even though some people believe that it was a major revision in 1994. And we had a paradigm shift going from a documented type of management focus on the product to focusing on the process and starting to build towards a business management system. The journey took us to 2008, where we tried to close some gaps in the standard, especially with making it more applicable for an integrated system with ISO 14001. And that brings us to where we are today. A month ago, the 2015 edition was published of ISO 9001, and we again are in another paradigm shift. We've moved the system more towards performance. We've moved it into a requirement that it's integrated into the business itself, and added a few things like risk management. So our journey brings us to another shift, which causes a lot of people a little bit of uneasiness. When we make change, that sometimes occurs to us. So what I tell people, and I ask you, is not to go crazy, not to get really anxiety over the changes in the standard. If all of us here remember back in 2000 when we went to the process approach, from 1994, there was a lot of controversy back then. A lot of people got some really, this will never work. You're taking all the documentation, people won't follow this. And so where are we today? What was the key then and still the key today is the fact that we create some type of transition plan, or you do, as moving forward, looking at the gaps in your organization and saying, how do I take myself to the areas where we aren't currently maybe in conformity or compliance to? So I think that's a very important aspect as we go forward here. Again, if you got some questions in there, and we're going to help you on your journey here towards 2015. And we've had 15 years, since process approach came in to work through this, and I think that's part of the difference. Most management standards change every 5 to 7 years and do make some significant changes, and we've been kind of happy running with this standard because of the 2008 minor changes, and now we're into a shift. So our webinar is going to be divided into 5 parts. Maybe I think I did. No. 5 parts. One of them is going to talk about the structure of the standard. And we're going to talk a little bit about directly some changes that were in ISO 9000 itself that was also revised that have a direct impact on implementing and transitioning ISO 9001. And then we'll take a quick little overview of some of the changes that are in the requirements and talk about transition. So that's kind of our plan here for the next 45 to 50 minutes. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat, and we will try to address anything that you may have. So let's begin at the largest paradigm shift that we have. We, just as in 1994, going from 20 elements to not having elements at all, but clauses. Today, and having 5 clauses that were audited, today we are shifting to a 10-clause format. As you notice from the screenshot, the scope, normative references, terms, and definitions remain the same. Now, the verbiage, I must caution you, is that, especially in the scope, there are some different information. There are some key information that's in the scope and also in point 1, point 2, and that I think if you're going to start off in this new standard may be beneficial, because many of us, we start with exactly the first clause that is going to be audited, and we kind of forget about the items in front. So just kind of caution in that regard. But you can notice that if you compare the clauses 4 through 8 against 4 through 10, most of the titles of the clauses are a lot different. Context of the organization is brand new. We will get into that definition just in a little bit. Managed leadership has replaced the management responsibility, and we'll talk more details there. That is a significant paradigm shift for top management. Planning is much more structured. So in the 2008 version, we talked a little bit about planning for objectives. We talked a little bit about planning in 7.1, but really never gave some good definition there. And clause 6 now, we have planning that puts us into a strategic plan and how to integrate this into a business. And this is also where risk is. Resource management now is called support for the most part. Product realization is operations, and measurement analysis and improvement has been split up into performance evaluation and improvement. So as you can see, even though titles have not been changed, many of the requirements and what we need to do to build the system has not changed. And we'll get more into the changes here in a few minutes. As I mentioned, ISO 9000 has made some changes, mainly because ISO 9001 includes some new words. The paradigm shift in some of the viewpoints has also required us to take some definitions that we've been using for years and modify those definitions. So there's a large portion. We sat in the last TC 176 meeting before the vote on this standard. The presentations that were made in the meeting basically highlighted the fact that if someone was going to implement ISO 9001, they should get a copy of ISO 9000 also, so that they understand the new terms as well as understand the terms that have been modified. So I'm just bringing that up to everybody to kind of look at, and you're going to have to take that risk and assess it as an organization yourself. So let's look at one of the major new changes that are in ISO 9001, which is also a requirement in ISO 9001 in clause 4.1, and that's the context of the organization. This requirement requires each organization to look at all the internal and external factors, condition, and how they affect the organization. These external, internal factors we'll get into a little bit more definition. We'll see a slide coming up here when we get to the clauses. But if they have an impact, we're going to have to address that in clause 6 in our planning and our risk assessment to mitigate any of these issues that may be there, which may also require us to broaden the scope or boundaries of our management system. These could be anything. That could be, some DOT requirements that we have, some issues in the community that might be there, industry standards that we don't really take fully into account, but might be changing today. And you can see there's a lot of notes that are in here in order to help clarify what this definition is. So just kind of highlight that this is one of the more significant type changes that are here, and very important to kind of understand, but not take it to a point where you're just so worried about it that it's there. It's a sit down brainstorming. Let's analyze it. Let's put some ideas on the board, and then we'll see how much does these really affect us. Do we need to change anything because of it? So just kind of work, because you could go off the deep end here, and I don't think anybody really needs to do that. The second clause of the standard, clause 4.2, now tells us that we need to look at interested parties and look at their concerns, expectations. Now, what's an interested party? Could be a stakeholder, as you see here, a banker, a union if you're a union shop. Could be the owners of the company, people within your own organization, employees and their families, and sometimes just society in itself, or some type of peer pressure group that might be there, a lobbyist group or so, depending on the industry that you're in. And what they're saying is, a lot of times in the management system, we focused only on what was in the standard and maybe our direct customers, but what we do every day is influenced by a lot of these other outside forces. And does our system really look at those and include those the way they should? And they're asking us to do that within the requirements. And again, we're going to get into a little bit more of that here coming up. But that is not only a new definition in the standard, it is also a new requirement in the standard. So just kind of wanted to be sure that we bring it up about the terminology. Another change that came in is for some reason, vendors, suppliers, and that have kind of disappeared. And they've been replaced by the word provider. And the reason for this is that within the standard today and under the process approach, we're looking at even internally the customer-supplier relationships between one line that feeds another line. So we have providers maybe from supplier to your own organization, but we also may have Op 10 feeding Op 20, and that might be a provider. You also have a lot of contractors that people are using. So contractors purely today are under, the purchasing provider type of issues, and many of us have used that here in the past, but it's more clearly defined within the new standards. Any questions that might be on there, feel free again, So interested parties, context, and organization are part of that new 10 clause structure that is labeled Annex SL. And as I pointed out, that sometimes is the biggest paradigm, this 10 clauses. So some people don't like the fact that we've increased these clauses, and some of these new terms have gone along with it. So again, we can outsource. It's a very important term to a lot of us, but again, we do not. The organization kind of changed a little bit of the definition here of a function or a process. Function, again, for testing, might be you're doing outside processing through them. And I've added three new definitions, statutory requirement, regulatory requirement, and product configuration information. We've used those terms in the standards, especially statutory and regulatory. We used to call them legal and regulatory and legal type requirements, but they really were never defined. And because of this interested party and context of the organization, since these are parties that could cause external issues or they could be part of the expectations, they actually came back down now and put these definitions out front. Notice that product configuration information is a mouthful. Requirement and other information for product design, realization, verification, operation, support. So it's kind of part of your strategy of how do you take this, utilize this product in a planning type nature, and how do we deal with it? How do we take it from design to realization? So ISO 9001, no, we really never got into as some of the maybe AS 9100 or TS in the automotive world got into with a little bit of the product and how it handles. The ISO 9001 2015 standard, we're getting closer there to having a little bit more understanding about the process, traceability, and dotting on I's and relationships between each of the processes. Kind of going back a little bit to, Demings and Schuhart types concept of the old process control world. Back to fundamentals, which Six Sigma uses quite a bit at this point. Even though nonconformity and conformity have not been changed, nonconformity now is a requirement in the standard, except for ISO 14000 and OSHA 18001. We've actually never used that term directly except for in audits. We use nonconformances in a non-conforming product, but not actually as far as the requirement goes. So that making sure we understand that is a pretty good concern. They've actually added a term of innovation, the drive towards lean, the drive towards looking at things in a much broader nature and that stress has brought us to have to require to have a definition for innovation. So it's something that's new or changed objective, realizing or redistributing value. So how do I take something where it is and make it more valuable to me? Bring value added, as in the lean world would say. So that's a stress now within our part of our improvement areas. Many of you have heard, I'm sure, and that the words record and document are not used any longer, nor is there a straight requirement for control of records, control of documents. That has been replaced with documented information. So documented information is a single clause, subclause, that handles how we handle documentation everywhere within the organization. We don't care if it's a record, we don't care if it's a document, we don't care if it's other evidence like data. So the purpose of this is that many of us use electronic systems, cloud-based systems today, and it's how we manage that cloud-based system, how we use security, who's allowed to have certain accesses. So it's not like the paper copies of the past. Some of us have large enough systems that our intranet is like the cloud-based system. So we need to come back and put a system in place that kind of handles the 2000s instead of kind of focused on a paper world, and that's really for what the change was for the documented information side. Product has changed its definition. It's an output of an organization that can be produced without any transaction taking place between the organization and the customer. So as I mentioned earlier, that we're looking at, could be op 10, op 20. We could be looking at supplier to your own organization. Well, each of those there's a product that's there, and the product it's not just maybe a tangible item. It can be information, it could be a cert, it could be data in some cases, test results. And so all those are outputs that are coming back in. So the product definition is kind of broadened. They've also, in 2008, said product also included service, and in the new standard, they are separated. So what you'll see is product or service everywhere. And that's the highlight in a lot of the changes, is to be able to apply this requirements to the service industry or smaller organizations. Performance kind of has a clear definition. Now it's totally measurable. So, if you're looking at a performance in any way before that, it's not going to be there. Must have a measurable type of result. There are a lot of people that kind of says, well, this is the film, yes, looks like, we had a sign of hands. But how do I take that to a quantitative type of measurement? So performance is looking for quantitative, and you can utilize qualitative as long as you show the ability to convert it. In the life of creation of ISO 9001-2015, we have gone through several definitions of risk. If some of you got a copy of the DIS, you see one definition, and the final definition is just the effect of uncertainty. The one note that causes some people some heartburn, and I've seen it as a statistician, I've seen some people that in the statistical world that doesn't like it, and that is the fact that by ISO 9001's definition in 9000s, we now can be positive or negative risk. And the reason they're saying that is that in certain situations, you're making a decision. Some of your decisions could look at is, can I actually make this benefit? We want to raise our yield to 98%. We're sitting at 93%. So is there a risk that we're basically on what we're going to do on the ability to get 98? Well, what do if we get 97? We have some positive type items. We have some good, but also what do we have to do? It might be some benefits in other parts of the organization. So we might lower our costs based on this risk, because the customer, we might hit on-time delivery a little better and not hit premium freight as high. So we're going to get, based on the risk assessment, we have some positives and we have some negatives out of the same assessment. And that's the key that they're trying to drive there. It's not like I do the calculation and I got a positive. The risk assessment itself brings out the highlights that there's some positive benefits as well as some negative benefits on something I do based on asking myself about the risk itself, the questions. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that, because we are in risk-based thinking and not risk management. That is a very critical concept I need for you to take back. There is no place in ISO 9001, 2015, or any of the documentation associated with it that says I must do risk management. So there's no link to ISO 33001 or 479071 or any of the other risk-based type sessions itself. Okay? So let's talk about the major changes to ISO 9001 that are also more obvious. One, there is no longer a requirement for a quality manual. Some people cheer this, some people don't cheer this. Oh, you know what? Still got to make a scope. We don't have exclusions anymore, but we may have clauses that are not applicable, so we need to define what is not applicable. We also have to define our processes, so there's some interaction and knowledge of how they interact. The only difference is that we don't have reference to procedures because we have no required procedures in ISO 9001. We'll talk about that in a minute. But also the management rep has been eliminated as a position in roles and responsibilities. And the greatest point I need to make is that of the A through F here, or actually A through D here, we're not saying, and nobody else is, that you don't continue doing what you're doing. If you do, if you decide you want a quality manual, have one. If you decide you want to have a management rep, there's nothing that says that you can't. The concept is that the responsibility for the management system today is with top management. That's a shift. We don't want it hidden behind some management rep and say it's your fault that the system's not working or this wasn't done. It's directly as auditors, directly as the standard that says top management, it's yours. You own it. You need to demonstrate how this works. And which is that paradigm shift, as I was talking a little bit about top management. So I don't want to put a soapbox on that, but just kind of understand that. We already talked about documented record control. It was replaced by the documented information, and we just seen the definition. I've already mentioned the documentation requirements. We do not require any procedures, so the 6 procedures. Understand this, the requirements are almost identical. The only difference is in the standard, it does not say documented procedure. It does say, here's all the things you need for an internal audit program, and you must make sure you have them. Here's all the things you need to control documented information, approve documented information, reapprove it, ensure that obsolete's taken care of and it is protected in that. So all the requirements are still there. It's the fact that you now need to make a decision. Do I need a written procedure to help me with this, or don't I? And the decision is up to you as an organization. What do I need to make sure that the system works, that it's effective, and the fact that it meets my intended purpose? Same thing with preventive action. We already, by definition of preventive action, understood that this was basically a risk assessment. It was risk. It was looking and asking questions, what could go wrong? Let's take action prior to something failing, which is what risk is all about. And so having preventive action being replaced in 2 clauses, one in 6.1 with risk, and then also 10.1, having opportunities for improvement, was just a natural phase here. So again, the difference is maybe documentation. We don't have those PAR forms anymore, things of that nature that you may have. We also seen during the definitions that non-conforming product, non-conforming service has been replaced by non-conforming outputs. So I can have a document that's wrong. I can have a service that somebody provides us that's incorrect. So my world today is a little bit different, that I need to look at things and understand what that is. And it's expanded because now I do need to consider tangible product. I might need to consider service that I provide for somebody. And I'm providing information. So is the information I'm providing accurate or not? Written as well as verbal. And so we've never really addressed that in the management system before, and today that's a requirement. So, kind of shocked some people, but it is what it is, and this is what the new requirements are at this point. So basically, if we look at the standard, there are many people that say there's 4 pillars to ISO 9001 2015. We start the system basically and create it by having understanding and knowing what organizational context and interested parties are. We take that information, we look at risk with regards to it and say, does this bring and have any impact on the organization? And we address and try to take advantage of any opportunities. And if we do that, those are kind of the major force changes that are in the standard. So kind of gives us a good kicking off block to go forward, and do things in that regards. So let's talk about some of the requirements. I think that's what a lot of you probably want to come into. So context of the organization. This diagram, I think, does a very wonderful job of understanding. So there's the requirement. Understand the organization and your own organization's context, internal and external. Well, it will impact meeting my purpose and objectives. So I'm, as an organization, what am I trying to achieve? What's our objective for being in business? Is there any influence from customers, trends, regulatory, competitors, technology, strategic priorities, or other internal or external issues internally, even itself? We got labor shortage. We're in an area where there's a high floodplain, maybe, that might be an issue. We got, in our area, it's hard to find workers. I have that by a few clients that I work with. They can't find workers. They just, in that area, people have to come from the outside. They're coming over an hour drive. Some do. But that brings a different type of issues, especially since they're close to a winter type issues and are affected by weather. So some people will drive that in the summer, don't want to drive that in the winter. So those are some issues that organization needs to take into account and how they schedule and things. Can they control it all? Some we can, some we cannot. The second one, of course, is we talked about interested parties. So who are interested parties? What's our customer's expectation for us? Do we have a customer that we have a good relationship with? Do we have a customer that's highly demanding? Some of us know who a few of those are that are high demand versus some of the others. Do we have a ownership? What's their viewpoint on supporting that organization? Are they driven by profit and dividends and that? What type that's there? What about our own employees and their families and their wages, benefits? How does that go? How much does an organization have to go out and have outstanding loans or involved in regulatory agencies, OSHA, maybe FAA, maybe FDA, maybe EPA, or send a lot of things overseas, and you got a lot of different customs and even other government regulations. Those all affect about what we need to do in our business. Some even add extra costs. But what 2015 is saying, make sure that we have that into our system and understand it so we mitigate those types of risks, because I take the information from 4.1 or context of the information, I combine it with 4.2, the interested parties, and I use that to create my management system scope in 4.3. So it's very important under the new requirements that I do 4.1, 4.2 in order to look at my scope, because all of us know that when your auditor goes in to audit for this the first time, even if you do not change your scope, they're going to have to ask and assess, did you do this kind of look at your issues there? Did you look at your interested parties and what proof that you have that you did? So this may not change your scope statement at all. No one says it will, but we're going to have to show the evidence that we did, that brainstorming, that sit down, and this is the illustration of that. Organization, take 4.1 of the context of organization, look at the information with interested parties, and I create the scope of the organization. Leadership. In 2008 version, as I mentioned, we have management responsibility. Management was there, stated that they must be committed, they must create and ensure that these things are a policy, objectives are done, we have a plan, we do management review, we have roles and responsibilities. But what management had to do from an obligation was ensure that these were done, which is why the management rep was perfect because, hey, I'd let them run the system. Today, the shift has gone to top management saying, you are now responsible for the management system and you must demonstrate your involvement. So instead of kind of being the boss and looking at the system holistically, you must be like the leader and be in front of the system, demonstrating and showing your dedication and drive that this system produces what it should produce. A little bit different type of viewpoint there, and for some, this is a little bit different. So you can see a little bit of this in 5.1. We also have in 5.1, which is the leadership area, is we're integrating this into the business system. So no longer will ISO 9001 2015 wants to accept that I run the business this way, and over here on the other hand is the quality management system. This is the way we run the business. The way the business is run, not by the quality department don't run the business. I've never seen one yet, even when I was in charge of quality. So top management's accountable. They're accountable for effectiveness. They must demonstrate. And this is going to be a change. So, how we communicate and how each organization communicates this to their top management and kind of drives that could be the basis on some items there for success in the standard. Clause 6 kind of highlights, as we see up at the top left-hand corner, planning for the quality management system. 6.1, as I mentioned, is risks and opportunities. 6.2 is where our quality objectives are. And 6.3 is the plan for achieving those quality objectives. And, we're going to be looking at risk and opportunities, again, based on the context of the organization, based on interested parties, as we've done and discussed, also earlier. And this is going to result also in having a strategic plan. We're looking at strategy now, requiring management now. Many organizations do this anyways. They have strategic plans, but a lot of your strategic plans in some organizations doesn't focus or it has the quality management system as part of that. And requirements today is this is integrated, it's one. So I want to stress that point. So I've said it a couple times, but that's the expectation here. So other things in clause 6, again, is the purpose is planning. Planning. Prevent or reduce risk, mitigate it, continual improvement in what we do, having actions to address the risk, make sure things are effective, and you love that word effective. Quality objectives are a little different when we get to the plan. A little bit more prescriptive in the way that they do it. Now we must, in the plan, define who, what, when, and how the objectives will be implemented. Because as many of us know, we went through several phases with quality objectives. There was a period of time when we shifted to measurable, where a lot of organizations struggled on trying to create measurable objectives. Then we're into a phase right now where many of the plans have been developed, but many organizations do not implement the plan correctly or update the plan as needed. The drive then was to change to this new criteria where I must be a little bit more oversight in ensuring that the quality objectives are being met, who is responsible, and be more definitive. Some of the other management systems like OSHA 18001 already had done that, but in the ISO 9001 world, we kind of were not into that world, and we're shifting now into there. moving on to clause 7, of course, this is where training, infrastructure, work environment, and communication is. So awareness also has been pulled out of the standard into a separate subclause. So we got competency as one clause, we have awareness as a clause, and training is an action to achieve competency. So we don't use the word training within as a title of anything any longer. And communication clause requires us both the internal and external communication. Documented information is in here in 7.5, 5.1, and calibration is in here. So it's a little bit different today into what you're used to and where things are located. But as I stress again, many of the requirements are the same. They just may have a different slight location. 8, it's old clause 7. Most of us would look at it as being, it's a called retitled to operations, make it simpler. We don't have that product realization word that's out there. But we do plan for service provisions, and we do mitigate risk here and within the processes. And a lot of that still comes back from items that are identified in context of the organization in 4.1, and then under interested parties in 4.2. Again, as I said, almost all the requirements are exactly the same, except for the titles and names are changed. Some of these look like they decided they wanted to get a book and write the total book length of title of the operations. So we'll see what happens there. I don't think you're going to see any surprises in Clause 8, except for some of the terms are used differently in aspects of that nature. Outsource processes again, Clause 7.5.2 and 7.5.1 have been combined into this standard. We don't separate those special processes like we did in 2008. We're saying, here's our processes. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we define them. Here's how we work processes every day. So it doesn't matter if I have heat treatment or if I'm just assembling a product. Also mentioned that when I get to non-conforming, we don't use non-conforming product any longer. It's non-conforming outputs. And, some people, they kind of took a step back when they heard that and said, oh, geez, what are they doing to us? Why is this? But I think I've covered that a little bit. I hope that kind of resolves what they were thinking about here. But again, we still got corrective action, and we got, nonconformity that's there that helps out to kind of say, hey, if something goes wrong here, where am I leaning to? I got to take action. My actions could be in just basic nonconformity, go get it fixed, or I could be somewhere where I have to do root cause analysis and corrective action. 9 is a little bit more prescriptive than it was in 2008, especially with monitoring and measuring. All of us are aware previously that we had monitoring measurement in one clause, said the process and the product, and then we had another clause that says analyze, but only analyze these few types of data. In the new 2015, the title and the expression is monitor, measure, analyze, and evaluate. So all things are being evaluated and analyzed. So if I have data, any data, I have all 4 requirements. So my quality objectives, my performance measures are all considered as part of that customer feedback. So they just didn't eliminate it for analysis to these 4, and I just don't analyze because they found a lot of organizations They made a nice bar chart maybe and analyzed it and said, well, yeah, look at this. We made a beautiful chart here, but they didn't do anything with it. They didn't evaluate what does that mean and what do I need to do because of that. Because of that inconsistency of lack of actions across the world, it became necessary to put in this term, an aspect of requirements to go in and evaluate so that we can kind of understand a little bit more what's happening. Hope you can appreciate that. I think many of you have seen that in your own organizations. Internal audits are also here. Management review is also here. Hasn't changed very much, management review, but change management is in both clause 8 and 9. Change management, except for product development in the 2008 version, was kind of, some people did it pretty well, but change now is a focus of the standard. We're going to be spending more time understanding when we make a change. And again, part of this is risk assessment. If I make a change, what is that doing to me? What kind of effect do I have of the change? And they want us not just to change for change purpose, but change because it gives us benefits. So they want and are driving to have more scrutiny when we go out and make some type of changes. And there's some organizations, and some of you may work for them, that seems like they like to change no matter what. We're going to go out and make a new logo. We're going to go out and reorganize today and put people in different positions. And everybody kind of looks at, well, why are we doing this? And they go, well, we need to do something different. But now hopefully that makes at least them a little bit more have to answer the question of, what's this doing to our organization when I do that? So clause 10 has seen some changes within the life of 2015. Originally, there was only 2 subclauses in 10 under improvement. We had 10.1, which was nonconformity corrective action, and we had continual improvement. Well, through the variations and different DIS and FDIS and CD, back and forth, understanding what's needed by organizations, they added 10.1 for opportunities for improvement, which again, kind of a part of preventive actions. Many of us have used those in our own auditing, type sessions, where we go back in and we do an audit and say, well, we don't use suggestion, recommendation, but over here, there might be some bad practices. I haven't seen enough that there's issues. A lot of you might walk through the facility, kind of like the safety type inspections, where you look back and say, this is just an accident waiting to happen. Well, so now 10.1 is that within the organization of the quality management system. So look at those things and say, hey, is there some opportunities for improvement? Because if I don't address this, this is going to be a failure. 10.2, nonconformity and corrective action, that hasn't changed very much, except for now we added the word nonconformity. Complaints are still there. I still have correction hidden underneath it, where there's an aspect that says, hey, this is, the only thing we need to do is go fix this. So just go get her done, and we got the problem solved. There's still the situation where it says, I don't know what caused this. We need to do deeper. Well, then the expectation is to go in and might have to do the fix first, right? Got to do something immediately to appease the customer. And then we turn back around and, go do it, and fix the cause itself. Go in and do the risk assessment. Go in and look at maybe opportunities for error proofing that might be there. So I must also evaluate which do I do. That requirement was kind of hidden in 8.52. Some organizations did it very, very well, but I think it's clearer this clause is now much more closer to what it has been in ISO 14001 and what it has been in OSHA's 18001, because we've always had nonconformity and corrective action paired together with preventive action in the past. Now they've dropped the preventive action at 14,000, and this requirement is exactly the same. So 10.3, and I'll just mention that before we go into this a little bit. 10.3 is nothing more than continual improvement. And that requirement is very, very similar to what it was in 2008 version in clause 8.51. We're going to go out and take whatever opportunities we can, looking at the organization, to make a paradigm shift. So the difference between 10.1 and 10.3, opportunities for improvement and continual improvement, is opportunities for improvement is action taken again. We got this bad feeling that there's going to be a problem, and we're taking action prior to that problem occurring, or a safety issue occurring, or customer dissatisfaction, doing that. While 10.3, I must do a step change. I'm going from 93% yield to 95% yield, and I made that change. I am running at a different level. So that is the way that you have to view these two clauses differently. So hopefully you kind of appreciate that. It's kind of similar to what the preventive action was, but a little bit more definition, I think, and clearer difference between the two, because the requirements are not written exactly the same, almost like it was in 852 and 853 between those two. And continual improvement highlights the fact that we're doing something in here that's totally different. So let's talk about the transition. Anybody that's not 2008 or wants to get certified ISO 9001 2015, that's new even, we needed to create a strategic plan for yourself, and by conducting a gap analysis. Call it a transition plan, strategic plan, whatever you'd like to do. But it's going to have to take a place where you kind of make a comparison and look at it. And look at the change that makes good business sense. How far do I go to what changes? Remember, you're bringing the requirements of the standard into your organization and say how it helps us to make us operate better. You're not taking your organization and say, how do I place it in ISO 2015? Because that's the wrong way to implement a standard. You operate the business. How does it fit into my business, and how do I use it in order to use it as a tool to help drive for me? Understand that, the standard's out, but I'm giving you from my perspective and BQY's the changes, and most of the information I'm providing is what came out of our changes as a member of TC 176. Here's the intent. But as this is being implemented across the world, people are going to do some interpretations as they did in 2000. They may say, hey, this is what we kind of mean by this. Some people may come back with some form. Some people may come back with some interpretation that's written out. So we need to look back at that and kind of say, what am I doing during this transition and leading this? Just some kind of a word of advice. I just don't want some people to go jumping in, but BQI, as you know, and we appreciate your involvement on this webinar. But we have a transition course that's kind of a half day, both for 14 and 9001. We have internal auditor and finalizing the lead auditor in this course. And we have done consulting on implementation of this if you need it. So I'm just bringing that out because you as the organization's in the driver's seat here. You got 3 years. There's a 3-year requirement transition. So this was published in September of 2015. All audits after September 2017 will be done in the 2015 framework under those requirements. So at worst case scenario, if you want to be certified ISO 9001 and continue to, you got for basically 2 years to build the system and the 3rd year there in 2018 to get certified. So, I think that's the key items that we wanted to present to you today. If there's questions or concerns or thoughts or clarifications that we can provide you, send them to, you didn't do it under chat here, you can send them to BQI, and they will forward them to me, and we'll address those. One of us in the organization will address those and try to assist you. If you're looking for some assistance in this, please contact us and we'll do that. But I do thank you for your participation. I know everybody that's here is busy. Everybody's got a full plate, and this change in the standard has kind of put another wrinkle on. Just want to mention a couple other things there real quick, but AS 9100, if some of you are dual certified, is due to be out sometime in the first quarter. They're expecting in 2016. TS 16949, the automotive standard right now is looking to be about the 4th quarter of 2016. 13485 has not given a date except for the fact that they expect it to be out in 2016. They have a pretty good draft together. So, and those are I think the major standards, and 14,000 is already out. So for environmental, and the new OSHA 18001 standard is named ISO 45001, could come out in 2016 also. So just kind of give you an update on some of the other standards that may impact you, because you might be a supplier to a automotive or aerospace, but not enough that they make you required. Just understanding that sometimes when those changes happen, it might affect you, and just want to give you an update there. So I thank you for your participation and attendance on this webinar. I hope it met your needs and fulfilled some of the questions you may have. And again, I stress, if there's questions that you have, please contact us. Help you work through this. I dabbled with this standard as being a member of the TC 176 for quite a long time now, as it's been developed, and seen a variety of versions here and heard a lot of controversy, and that's there of people's concerns. So I appreciate that people's understanding of it, and some of the things that might cause them some concern, and how do I apply this type of look. So thank you. That ends our presentation for today, and good luck in your journey towards ISO 9000 2015 transition.